Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Great Retention with Kamber Parker, sponsored by Generational Performance Solutions. I'm Kamber, founder and CEO of GPS, where we bring you strategies to cultivate a high-performing and committed team in a rapidly changing workplace. Whether you're looking to enhance cross-generational communication or navigate generational dynamics in the office, you've come to the right place. Today, I am really excited to have Moe Rice, partner and director of people and culture at Brains, joining us from Greenville, South Carolina, right here. Brains is an independent, full-service creative ad agency based in Greenville and Los Angeles. Moe became a partner at the start of 2025, but she's been managing people and projects at Brains for over a decade now. In 2024, Moe connected with our team as part of our Getting It Right blog series, and I'm thrilled to have her in the studio with me today to discuss the bold moves that Brains makes both in advertising and in talent management. Moe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kamber. I'm glad to be here.
We also have to share that we have a mutual connection in our alma mater.
That's right.
So go Dens.
F you all the time.
Yeah, F you all the time. Love that. We did not cross paths there, but I like that our paths have crossed over recent years because of this.
Absolutely.
So we're going to jump into a lightning round. So in a couple of sentences or less, which I know is really hard, I like to follow up with a lot of questions, but we could talk about it offline. So what is something that is not on your resume?
Motherhood. I think there's a lot of lessons I've learned for the office that I've been taught by my two children.
Yeah, beautiful. And we will talk a little bit more about that today.
Great.
So we'll loop back to that. If you weren't in the advertising business, what would you be doing?
In no particular order. Organizational psychology is like a dream. I could have been a neuroscientist. That would have been really cool. Or I could be a power washer.
Yeah, okay. I love the no particular order piece. And org psych. Love that.
Absolutely.
So again, we're also going to probably talk about that. What is the best professional advice you've received from a mentor?
It was watch your face.
All right. I have follow-up questions there, but it's lightning round. Best business book recommendation you've ever received?
I really liked Grit by Angela Duckworth. I took a lot out of that, just that, it's not all about talent. It's also about perseverance. And then also there's something now that I say to my son all the time. I saw her speak at the Great Places to Work conference last year in, where was that? New Orleans. Anyway, she said, don't quit on a bad day. And so that's something that I say to my son all the time.
I love that. I read that book in high school and it really shaped my life, I think. So shout out to Grit as well. All right, so let's jump into some of the meat of our conversation today and start by talking about looking at some of the ads that Brains has created.
Oh, sure.
It's clear that the company is in the business of taking big creative swings, and this extends to internal choices as Brains is a certified B-Corp, meaning the company is required to meet rigorous social and environmental standards that are certified by a third party. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of standards Brains is meeting as part of its B Corp certification, and how do you think these standards aid in talent attraction?
Absolutely. So we've been a B Corp for, I think, almost 9 years. We're up for recertification. That essentially means we're accountable to more than profit. So all B Corps are measured against very rigorous standards for environmental sustainability, community impact, transparency, employee experience, and they change the standards very, very regularly. Pretty much every time we recertify, there's a whole new set of standards that we've got to meet. So to say it keeps us on our organizational toes is really an understatement. But that level of rigor creates discipline, especially from the leadership team. We have to operationalize our values. We can't just say we're operating one way. We have to actually provide receipts. So it's not enough to just say you care about people. Like, what are you doing to back that up? So we talk about that a lot in hiring. Nuts and bolts, how does this impact my day-to-day? It does impact how we look for talent, the questions we ask when we hire. It impacts how we hold those interviews. It impacts how we onboard. It impacts how we offboard also, how we set goals internally. It also impacts the types of clients we can take and can't take. We can't take clients in certain industries that actually harm people on the planet, of course. So that's always complicated, but has really kept us on the straight and narrow. Now we're sort of a mission-driven, purpose-driven company. And then also how we care for our team, how we care for our community, the benefits that we offer, the types of donation, volunteer opportunities that we offer, stuff like that.
That's great. It's rare that we have guests on here that are a certified B Corp, so I am really intrigued by this. And I would imagine it does really positively impact your talent attraction process and retention. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. People, when we're hiring, that's one thing that sticks out about us. It's like, oh, you're a B Corporation, especially in the creative field. We're not going to work with Monsanto, for example. But there's lots of big shops that will work. I mean, it's tough out there. So sometimes you just got to make a sale, but we do have this like higher level of standards that we've got to withhold to. And it makes people, I think it makes it easier for people to bring their talent to the table when they know that the causes that they're working for are not actively harming society.
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. But I also really like that you mentioned the client aspect. So it's not just about talent attraction, but it's also about how you choose clients. I think that's really impactful. So I'm sure for those who are listening or watching, if they're curious at all about more of the status, there's probably a lot of resources they can go look up if they're curious. But I would imagine winning talent can also be impacted by that status.
Yeah.
So that's super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We're proud of it.
Awesome. As you should be. So let's dive into talking about generations, right? Why we are here at GPS. And one thing I find really curious is when I talk to leaders, they'll share with me, we're just really struggling with these young kids. And I'll ask a little more questions and they're like, it's the millennials. And I'm like, okay, well, millennials are 30 to 45
we're
years
middle-aged
old, right?
now.
Like we are the majority of the workforce as we speak. And so I always find that interesting. But the reason I bring it up is because you're a millennial who is a partner and director at a company. And you're a wonderful example of what we, have just really talked about. So do you think that your generational identity has influenced your workplace values at all? And how does that impact your leadership style today?
I do. This was a great question because I was like, I really had to think about who am I as a millennial? Listen, I think are you a millennial?
I'm the tail end of the millennial.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'm like
zillennial.
zillennial. Yeah, you know your stuff.
All right, great. So millennials were criticized when we first entered the workforce for example, like wanting a ton of flexibility. Now hybrid work is attractive and popular. Obviously, there's a lot of return to office, but hybrid work is sort of standard now. We were also criticized for wanting purpose and want my work to mean something. Now ESG, B-Corp, stuff like that, that's more mainstream, especially we could talk about Gen Z, but that's even more important to Gen Z. I think we were also criticized for wanting feedback or like getting that little participation trophy. But now I think it's pretty proven that continuous performance conversations are totally, I lost my words. You'll have to cut this out. Continuous performance management models are really important to retention of top talent. And then I think we were criticized for questioning hierarchy, and psychological safety is now totally standard and encouraged in the workforce. So I think that all of those things impacted my career. I do think purpose-driven work really does get me going. That's why I'm at Brains, but that is probably the most millennial thing about me.
Yeah, I really love hearing your perspective as a millennial and like hear you talk about your identity as a millennial and how it shows up in your leadership. One thing you didn't mention is collaboration. And I think from what I know about Brains, like highly, highly collaborative environment, that is another core trait based on all of our data on millennials. And so is there anything that you can speak to about collaboration and how you show up? Because I think that's how you lead based on what I've seen.
Yes, absolutely. Collaboration is integral to our process. Like our work wouldn't be good. No, there's no genius alone on the island at Brains. When I started at Brains, it was different. It wasn't really like that. And so I have lived through the sort of the transition out of the like lone genius myth into this collaboration is better. One idea sparks another. And so it's like I said, integral to our process. We're so small. We're just 29 people. We do quite a lot of work across all sorts of different industries. And so it's our work is better. The output is better when we are actually collaborating with each other.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking to that.
Yeah.
Pivoting to our Getting It Right series that you all were featured in, I think at the end of 2024, our team spoke with you and your colleague, Mary Susan, about multiple ways that Brains leadership doesn't really follow the status quo of the typical ad agency. Can you share a bit more about Brains' origins and its attempts to operate a little bit differently? So we've obviously talked about how you operate from a B Corp status, but is there anything else maybe about the philosophy that has helped the company retain its team? Like you said, you're 29 people, but while it's small in, ad agency, if you're looking at other ad agencies around the country, it's still sizable. So how do you retain talent and what are some of the differences that really make you stand out?
Yeah, and our average retention right now is 5 years, which is long.
Incredible.
Especially in this
industry.
Do you have
is it pretty millennial?
It's highly millennial, but there's more Gen Z now in the workforce, but it's mostly all of the leadership is millennial at this point.
Wow.
So the idea of brains, it was born over 40 years ago, 43 years ago is probably the appropriate thing to say. So it's been an idea for a long time. So it's been many things in those past 4 decades, but it has always been highly flexible ever since I started even 14 years ago, which was a different time. So I think the through line is this belief that we're doing work that's about people. And if you don't treat people like people, both in advertising and also in business, then the impact's going to be negative. It's not going to be a positive outcome for you. And then I think the other through line is that creativity really thrives in independence. So we're not owned by a holding company like a lot of big creative agencies are. And that really allows us to move faster and take risks, be more flexible, prioritize long-term relationships, stuff like that.
Great. I love that answer. We're going to make sure we link the notes in the show notes to that blog series because I know things have changed. It's almost a year and a half later, but it sounds like the core of your business has stayed pretty similar in terms of how you attract and retain talent. But we'll make sure that people who are listening and watching that want access to that blog series, we'll put it in the show notes. So you've now been at Brains for 13 years, I think, and have held many different titles. So let's talk about one of my favorite topics, which is career growth and development. What has Brains done to nurture your professional development in this time period and the other millennial leaders in this time period? I'm very curious about that. And how do you try to do the same for the teams that you lead today?
Yeah, that was another great reflective question. So I came in 13 years ago as a community manager. That was like a social media manager when social media was brand new. So that was really early in my career. And I think personally, I've always had the audacity to ask for stuff for my career. So I do remember multiple times I was told like, boss won't give you a raise. That's not gonna happen for you. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go ahead and try. And pretty much every time, if I can make a business case for my own promotion, then it would happen. So from there, I think I stepped up. I was like, hey, I've built this social team and I would like to build a department of social. So we had like 9 employees doing social media for a while, and that was a very fun period of time. And in that time, I really realized that what I actually care about is not the work itself necessarily, but seeing people do the work and growing through the work. So that's when I realized, oh, I could do people and culture. That'd be so great. Made a business case for that and was able to move into that role without really knowing what I was doing. That's just kind of part of it. So I think the biggest thing about Brains is that it always sort of operates as a startup. It's kind of scrappy. We're always reinventing ourselves because that's how the market works. Yeah. And so we will never be the people who are like, nope, this is the way we do it, and that's how we're going to do it, and that's the end of that. We always change, and so that's not an environment that everyone loves, but it isn't. A lot of us love it. I love it. I don't really like doing the same thing every day. And so I think that in that environment, there is always white space. There's always like a sky to spread your wings in. And so what I try to instill in my staff is like, show us the business case for what you're passionate about, and then we can build your career from there. Obviously, we do have a career track and we have leveling and we have all of that stuff that we've instated since I've taken on this role. But really, we're entrepreneurial and creative. And it's like, if there's something that you can do that lights you up, that makes our business better, like I'm all for it. And those opportunities were afforded to me too.
Yeah, I love that. And it's great. Like you have the paths and you have maybe a little bit of a sandbox to play in if somebody is really passionate about something that is maybe tangential to Brains. And it's like, we're not going to say no. We might not say yes, but like give us kind of the lay of the land and tell us what you're interested in. And then we'll see if we can make it possible.
Absolutely.
You're playing to people's strengths.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'm also hearing just a certain level of pivots and just being adaptable as an organization. And so that's going to weed out people on the front end in the talent space. Like if you're hiring talent and you're like, hey, are you adaptable? Are you flexible? Like you're going to be able to tell pretty easily and early on if they're not the right fit. Yeah. So that I think really helps if you know what your culture of career growth and development is.
Yeah. We've also defined like what makes an excellent performance. And so that just sparked something for me. We have these 5 markers, which we go through in annual reviews, and it's built into how we hire, it's built into how we screen, but one of those is pivot with purpose. So, if you are able to take in new information and then move in the right direction, not careen wildly around, but say, okay, how are we going to change this?
Yeah.
Then you'll be more successful, I think, at Brains and in the advertising industry in general.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great. So a lot of advertising is about creating a strong sense of connection and mutual trust with your clients, and then by default with their audiences. Brain seems to have mastered the art of authenticity and connection with the ads that you create. How does that translate internally to a truly connected team? And then I have a follow-up question to that I'll jump into after.
To connect with people externally, we have to connect internally as a team. We talked about collaboration earlier because creativity is really a team sport. So if we don't have trust inside of our walls, then we can't manufacture that for a client. Like the working ways don't flow and our work suffers. So that really starts in how we operate every day. Practically, that means we encourage direct feedback. We use radical candor, hashtag ratty candy. And we set clear expectations for folks. We really try not to tolerate what we would call being an asshole or a passive-aggressive culture. And then one of those markers of excellence is work out loud. So we are a hybrid workforce. People are everywhere. They're not just in Greenville. They're in Los Angeles, like you said, but they're also in Colorado, in New York City, in Florida. And so we do have to make a really clear sort of distinction on how we work. And it's just a whole lot of typing and saying where you are, even if you feel like, why should I have to give this status update? Everybody's work impacts one another. So work out loud. There's also another layer to it. It's insight is part of our creative process. And during that phase, we essentially practice what I describe as like professional beginner's mind. So we just listen a ton. We ask a ton of questions. And so we are all very curious and good at that skill, which is important in advertising, but it's also important for teamwork. So we're all very empathetic, observant people. We try to hire for that too. So that makes it easier to work with each other, I think.
Yeah, of course. I can't imagine another way. Let's also talk about patterns and trends that you're seeing across generations that influence your team's decisions to market to specific audiences. So a little backstory with that question. A lot of the work we do, we've worked with marketing firms and agencies over the years to support some of their marketing decisions and creative decisions because we have data on how to sell to Gen Z versus how to sell to baby boomers. And so I'm kind of curious to know how you're marketing to certain segments based on the knowledge that you have of these different age groups.
Sure. A great example, because like I said, we have clients across all sorts of categories, but we do have quite a few family and parenting brands. Just based on some of our past work, we've grown in that area, and we're also just good at it. Most of us are parents. I like to say we could staff a baseball team with all of our kids, and that's something that that also essentially forces us to be flexible with our staff because we want them to go have lives and be able to, see their kids' recitals and stuff like that. So anyway, a great example there is that millennials, while they're still having children, most millennials are now kind of moving into school-age children. And so Gen Z is this new cohort of parents that we're starting to look at. And they think about the world and they think about, I think, values and talk about B-Corp and like ESG. They really want receipts to back that type of stuff up. It's not just like, show me your slick marketing campaign. It's what exactly did you do? I think that Gen Z is less trusting, I think, in general to begin. I'm not a Gen Z person, so I can't say this, but this is what the research tells us. So that does impact how we would activate in person all the way to how we would speak to Gen Z versus millennials. An interesting sort of problem we've been chewing on this week.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw a curveball here. And so you can just share a comment or you can say pivot. We'll go to the next one. But I saw something this morning from Jason Dorsey, who is a generational expert, researcher, and has been in the space for a long time. And he shared, and I think he was on some major news outlet, I can't remember which one this week, talking about how Gen Z is pulling away from social media because they are kind of like, wait a second, this is really impacting us mentally, right? I think many of them have already picked up on this, but they're collectively doing something about it. So that in itself means that creatives need to find different ways to reach Gen Z.
Absolutely.
Because they are distrustful of corporations because they're like, they're trying to sell to us in a really unethical way in ways that don't align with our values. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do, actually. I just finished The Anxious Generation, and they're one of our clients now, which is really exciting.
Shut up.
I won't shut up. I won't.
Oh my gosh, this is huge news. Can you introduce us?
It's very exciting. So, and what they are doing is so important. And that purpose-driven work is, we're just kicking off that project and we're so excited.
That's
but
really cool.
I did read the book, and yes, Gen Z was highly negatively impacted by growing up on screens. And so it's no wonder. I'm actually glad to hear that they are starting to say, let's maybe not be so online. I'm sure you've seen, the trend of analog bags and analog rooms, which to me is just like, I probably have a pack of cards in my bag and a bunch of snacks too. But I think it's important, especially if we're going to protect the next generations.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm glad to hear if research backs up that they're distrustful of social, then you got to show up in person and make like real community connections.
Yeah, have different ways to connect with them. Thank you for speaking to that.
Of course.
Another topic that you have touched on with us is your experience being a working mother while at Brains. And you've already mentioned the baseball team fact about your team. And many of your colleagues have hit major milestones while working there, one of which is growing your families. So can you tell us about the ways that Brains has made room for working parents to thrive, including initiatives that you've led? Yeah,
so like I said, we've always been highly flexible. And one way in which we were very flexible since before I even started at Brains was bringing your kid to work. So we have a babies at work policy. It's changed now that we're hybrid a little bit. It's more so like you can just work at home with your baby. That's okay. But I took my son to the office from when he was 6 months old till he could crawl. And one of our founders, Robin Phillips, had been doing that, 20 years prior. And so it was just established that like there would be babies at the office sometimes. And that's okay. Some people didn't love it, but for the most part, babies inspire empathy and joy and wonder. So we got along just fine. But I've become a mother. I became a mother in my leadership journey, but then I've, added one. So 2 times I've done this, and that really changes you. I think it sharpens your priorities. It forces you to think about your energy. And then it really makes you acutely aware of how the company's culture actually supports this kind of impossible thing that we're asking working mothers to do, which is work full-time, parent full-time, manage the household, all of that. So I think we've done a really good job at managing to provide flexibility while still holding really high standards for performance. We don't have a strict 9 to 5, right? We have collaboration hours. That's one thing we do. Again, we've got people in many different time zones. So we set like 4 hours a day where we don't have one-on-one meetings, in your same time zone. We try to reserve those for working together. We have very flexible schedules. At any given day, you can look on my Slack channel for this, and people are like, I gotta go, get a haircut or whatever. I've got to go to the doctor, things like that. We know you can't fit all of that in Saturday and Sunday. So like live your life. We trust people to get their jobs done on deadline. And so I think we also have very flexible onboarding and offboarding for parents when they're exiting for their maternity, paternity, when they're coming back in. And then we have a lot of early and proactive conversations about it. It's like, you can tell us as soon as you're ready, but we'll start planning for your leave as soon as you would like. And then I think the most important is that we try to have an honest dialogue about workload before people burn out, which we might get to in a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a perfect segue. I don't know if you planned that, but let's talk about burnout, because there has clearly been, really since 2020, this massive shift from aspirations of the hustle culture to current expectations around sustainability, prioritization of mental health, and then warnings of burnout. So the B word, right, that you just mentioned. How do you and the entire Brains leadership staff maintain high standards while creating an environment that doesn't glorify burnout?
It's tough. It's really tough because we hire anxious achievers also. I'm not trying to. They'll tell me that later. We do a pulse survey to check stress and satisfaction. And so we do this now on a monthly basis. We've done it weekly. We've done it biweekly. Now I do it monthly. But the number one factor of stress, the number one source of stress that my team says is their own self-imposed pressure. It's not like deadlines necessarily. Deadlines are crazy sometimes, but for the number one source of stress is their own sort of introjected expectations of themselves. So I do think that high performance and sustainability are often framed as opposites. They're not. I think a lot about energy management now, especially as a partner, but also I think it applies all the way down to like the most junior designer on the team. I think that it's not true now that just working long hours means you're committed, especially in a creative field, because the more that you use your energy, the worse your output is. So we really try to head it off at the pass with people like, hey, you seem really stressed out. Can you go touch grass? Take a day, please. We'll cover for you. So because we're so small and connected, we kind of sense that to begin with. But then, that sort of consistency, it's not always sustainable. Sometimes like the job's just got to get done. So we're good at jumping in for each other if somebody's got to tap out, which is, there's not really a system for that. it's just how we operate.
And also just being observant.
That's right.
Because you're a small team. So you're going to be able to notice if somebody is not getting the job done.
That's right.
Do you think that achieving balance, which I say a little bit ironic, it's balance is like the other B word that everybody talks about. Do you think it looks different across generations?
Yeah, certainly. I think, I don't want to make blanket statements. I think that Gen Z, because how they were raised and because they all talk a lot more openly about their mental health challenges. I think millennials do a pretty good job of that too, but I think that I don't think I know that it more directly impacts that generation. So they are much more keen to say like, no, I'm drawing a boundary and I need to take a break. We have only millennials and Gen Z on our staff, so I can't speak to the other generations now. But I do think there's a difference. I wrote about this in my series, but this term quiet cracking, I don't know that you've talked about that at all.
I haven't on the podcast, so why don't you kind of describe your side of the house? I'd love our audience to hear it.
Yeah, it's quiet quitting was a term that came up maybe during COVID.
It was during COVID.
Yeah, so like that concept that I'm just gonna do the bare minimum, and I show up, I leave. I don't really make an impact, but I'm quitting psychologically. Quiet cracking is this idea that you're showing up to work, you're doing great, but you're actually burned out and sort of a husk of a human on the inside. And so you're like steps away from really fully burning out, which it seems like there's more and more people, more and more cases of quiet cracking because you just can't tell. I mean, a lot of this also has to probably do with the fact that a lot of our work is on a screen. So I don't show up in person like this with everybody. It's much more easy to tell somebody's energy if you're in the room with them versus, you can be on a screen and you can mute yourself. I say, I got a headache. I'm not feeling it today. That person can be totally having the worst day of their life and you would never know. So it just makes you have to be more keen on listening and checking in. And then also having a really strong management team and management philosophy, really good coaches, helps you mitigate that.
Yeah.
That's kind of an insidious one.
Thank you for sharing that example. So I'm mindful of time here.
Sure.
And so my last question for you is one that kind of was triggered by something you said earlier, which is you only have Gen Z and millennials on your staff, right? That I think is worth discussing because Gen X is a smaller generation. So, they're still in the workforce. They're about 25% of the workforce still that is not on your team. And so being a team that really only has these two generations, which in essence are kind of like 5 generations because there's all the micro generations. And so you kind of understand it's not truly 2 generations.
Sure.
But there's no baby boomers, there's no Gen Xers. And so I'm just really curious about that. And I want our listeners who, we have a lot of Gen X and baby boomer listeners to the show. And I try to speak to those audiences often about how this is the reality that Gen Z and millennials make up more than half of the workforce today.
Right.
And so we have to figure out a way to get knowledge transfer from these senior generations and leaders to our younger workers. It's getting more common to have millennials be the entire leadership team. And so we have to get that message to people. Hey, millennials are 30 to 45 years old. So is there anything that you would say when I share that with you that you'd want our audience to know and listen to?
Totally. Well, again, I've been at this company. I've only been a partner for a year and 3 months, but I've been here for over a decade. And so there was a leadership team that was, I don't want to speak for all of them. I think they're boomer. I think they're young boomers. I don't know. Sorry, Robin, Greg, and Greg. But they taught us a lot. So I had years and years of learning from them on how to run a business, just just by way of being there. So we did have quite a bit of knowledge transfer. It just so happens that maybe like 7 years ago, they transferred the business to Ben and Brandy, and then that's been transferred to me. So I think that the most important thing there was being willing to kind of slow down and explain to a millennial, like a young, scared millennial, how they think about the business, how they tackle big problems. I just saw Greg Cordell at lunch the other day. He was having lunch with a previous partner, the founder of Brains, who was there, way before my time. And both of them are always so willing to talk to me about partnership now and the world that I've moved into. Cool. So I think it's just being open to the curiosity, and that sort of, we talked about at the beginning of this, millennials have kind of questioned like hierarchical norms. And so just being aware that, yes, of course, like you will retire and we will step into this middle-aged sort of managerial spot. And I think most of us, especially in advertising, are really curious to learn from our elders.
Yeah, thank you. I know that was a curveball question,
Sure.
And you handled it beautifully. I really just think that is why we're here. It's to talk about curiosity. So you hit on some of those major themes today.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about today that we didn't get a chance to, Mo?
I don't think so. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. We'll make sure that people know where to find you in the show notes today.
Okay.
But thank you so much for being a guest, Mo.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been such a treat. Thank you all for joining us again on The Great Retention. Before you go, remember this: the generational landscape is shifting, and today's workforce is not the same workforce we once knew. Our mission is to help you save time and money by identifying these shifts and demystifying generational differences through our keynotes, workshops, leadership programs, and workforce planning. Contact us today if you're interested in transforming your multi-generational team, and let's drive your business towards long-term sustainability and success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic. And don't forget to share with your coworkers. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.